Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into a profoundly unsettling stack of source material today. It's a collection of accounts that really force us to challenge the very foundation of where we're all supposed to feel the safest.
Our homes.
Exactly.
Home. That's so true. I mean, think about it. We spend so much time, so much energy and money to establish this sanctuary, right? Whether you're buying that first house or you finally lock down the perfect apartment. The threat we all prepare for, the one we think about, it usually comes from the outside, from the unknown.
Like a stranger.
A stranger. But the materials we're diving into today, they detail what happens when the deepest menace is hiding in plain sight.
Just across the property line. Or worse.
Or worse, sharing a wall.
The analogy we kept coming back to when we were reviewing these sources is it's that of the structured suburban life. It's presented like this meticulously organized garden.
Yeah, like the...
Everything looks so neat, contained, and it's designed for, harmony and predictability. Yet these three separate narratives, and they are deeply detailed, just raw, personal chronicles of terror, they show us that the soil, right beneath that tidy surface, can conceal these deep, venomous roots.
Roots of hate, violence, malice.
And when those roots finally surface, the collapse of that perceived safety it's immediate, it's aggressive, it's just catastrophic.
Our mission today is heavy, and I think we need to dedicate a lot of time to truly unpack the nuances here. We aren't just summarizing horror stories.
No.
We are dissecting the psychological processes at play for the victims and also for the perpetrators. We really need to analyze the common stages of paranoia and threat escalation in close quarters living.
And maybe most critically, we need to spend time dissecting the mechanism of legal and institutional helplessness that the victims describe.
That's a huge piece of this.
It is. Because when the threat is so physically close, the systems that are designed to protect us, they just seem so ill-equipped to handle it. The continuous harassment, the psychological warfare, it all happens without that one piece of incontrovertible proof.
And so the victims are often just forced to flee. They have to incur these massive financial and emotional losses simply because the law can only, document their terror?
That's the word they use, document.
It's an essential analysis because these stories all share a pattern of hidden malice, a malice that's often disguised by the very nature of modern politeness.
And that social pressure, right, to just keep the peace in the neighborhood.
Exactly. Don't make waves. So we're going to look at 3 cases now, and we'll start with Mike's terrifying experience in Georgia, where the threat began with something as simple as a stare.
Okay, let's unpack Mike's story first. The source material, it establishes the setting immediately. You have Mike and his fiancée, an Asian couple, and they had just purchased their starter home. It's in a typical, quiet, suburban town in Georgia. They were embarking on what should have been, the most optimistic chapter of their lives.
And that point about the starter home is so much more than just a real estate detail, isn't it? It represents this deep emotional investment.
Ew.
Mike even notes in the source, they felt lucky to even buy a house at our age. And that phrase, it just encapsulates their optimism, but it also shows their inherent vulnerability.
How so?
Well, they were fully invested in the neighborhood, right? But crucially, they had the least established roots, the least social capital there. And this makes them, psychologically a very easy target for someone who's looking to assert dominance.
And the neighborhood itself was, completely unremarkable. Quiet streets, decent backyards, everything functioning exactly as you'd expect, except for one house.
The house on the left, Gordon's house.
Yes. The contrast is immediate and very telling. While the rest of the street was sort of open and normal, Gordon's house was defined by secrecy.
The curtains were always shut.
Always. The interior looked always kind of dark inside, even when his car was clearly in the driveway. This immediately sets Gordon apart.
Yeah.
He's physically present, but he is socially isolated. He's visually guarded. He's defying that general open social contract of suburban living.
Yeah, that unspoken agreement.
The first signs of trouble began subtly.
Yeah.
And they evolved very quickly from just awkward to ominous.
It was Mike's fiancée who noticed first.
Right. They were carrying groceries. And she sort of whispers about it, and Mike looks over and sees a man standing behind the front window. The source says, only half visible but totally watching them.
And the critical detail here is the reaction, or I should say the lack of a reaction.
That's
It's
it.
the absence of the normal social response that makes it so chilling. A normal neighbor, they might wave, or they might quickly turn away embarrassed they got caught looking.
Sure.
Gordon didn't rave. He immediately retreated into the darkness of the room. This vanishing act. It's not an accident, it's calculated surveillance. It fundamentally shifts the dynamic from just a chance encounter to intentional, covert observation. He goes from being the awkward neighbor to someone who is watching us.
And once they were sort of sensitized to it, they couldn't unsee it.
Yeah.
Over the next week, the sources recount several instances of this. Mike sees him in the living room window when he's leaving for work. His fiancée sees him from their upstairs window while she's just checking the mail. Every single time he was observing them. But the second they looked back,
He was gone.
gone.
And this established a silent, really unsettling power dynamic. Gordon was actively asserting control over their presence simply by knowing their routines, by observing them, while at the same time denying them the right to look back or to acknowledge him.
It's like a one-way mirror.
It is! This is the subtle, insidious erosion of their sense of privacy. They were slowly realizing they were living in an observed, controlled environment, even on their own property.
The true shift, though, from that kind of passive spying to overt intimidation, it happened late one night. Mike was just walking past their upstairs bedroom window, which directly faced Gordon's house. He looks over, and this time, Gordon makes sure he's seen.
The source material really emphasizes this point. Gordon was fully visible, standing straight up, his face turned directly toward Mike's bedroom window at midnight.
It's such a deliberate, unambiguous violation. He just broke that invisible social barrier that dictates that, even if you can see into your neighbor's bedroom, you don't stare.
Of course not.
This moves the act from just secret creepiness to a direct psychological challenge.
Yeah.
So Mike freezes, and Gordon realizes he's been caught in the act of this overt staring, and he steps back from the window. The very next morning, a confrontation felt inevitable. And sure enough, Gordon shows up at their door.
The timing here is so crucial to analyzing Gordon's intent, isn't it? He knows he crossed a line, but rather than wait for Mike to act, he preempts the whole conversation.
He takes control of the narrative.
Exactly. He introduces himself politely, he offers an apology for the stare, and he gives this excuse, claiming he was putting something on his window ledge.
Now, this is an incredibly important moment. Mike notes in the source that Gordon offered a welcoming enough smile, and he initially felt relief. You described this apology earlier as a form of dominance testing. But for Mike, didn't it offer a brief, maybe even a desperate moment of hope that maybe this wasn't sinister?
Oh, absolutely.
That it was just an awkward interaction with a weird guy?
And that's a powerful point. It speaks directly to the victim's natural desire to rationalize away a threat. Yes, Mike experienced short-term relief, but that's exactly the function of the manipulation. The apology is a classic form of testing boundaries.
So he's probing.
He's probing. Gordon crossed a severe boundary, offered a flimsy but plausible excuse, and then he just gauges Mike's tolerance level. If Mike accepts the lie and grants forgiveness, Gordon now knows he can push further without an immediate legal consequence. He maintained that facade of normalcy just long enough to continue his campaign.
And push further he did. The escalation moved from visual to physical. A physical boundary violation just a week later. The first physical trespass happened around midnight.
Mike's fiancée woke him up. She heard someone in the yard.
And Mike, looking out the window, he saw a full-grown man walking around like he was looking for something. When Mike yells, "Hey!" the person just bolts, slamming the gate shut.
And Mike's response here is so telling. He admits, "I didn't go outside because I didn't feel safe." The threat has successfully turned their own property into a place of insecurity. It forces them to retreat. That is the definition of psychological warfare.
The perpetrator returned just a few nights later. This time they heard rustling outside, and the source says it sounded like someone shimmying some kind of lock.
So it's not just casual trespass anymore. This suggests a deliberate, focused intent.
And this time, Mike got confirmation. He saw enough to recognize the face and posture of Gordon, and he yells his name out the window. Gordon doesn't respond, just walks away. But that confirmation forced Mike to confront him directly.
And Gordon's response to that direct confrontation is just textbook denial, isn't it?
Completely. He answers the door quickly, he's smiling, and he offers this evasive lie. He was chasing away kids who always jumped the fences in the neighborhood.
And that lie is locally plausible, right? It's designed to dismiss Mike's very serious concerns as an overreaction to a common neighborhood nuisance.
But Mike saw the real story. He notes in the source that despite the smile, he saw hate in his eyes, I swear. This is the moment Mike realized the truth wasn't awkwardness or some kind of mental illness, it was malice. It was rooted in a deep personal resentment.
And Gordon was controlling the narrative, yet Mike knew he was being lied to. It puts him in this terrible position where he knows the truth, but he lacks the proof he needs to take any kind of action.
And this brings us to the shocking climax of this part of the story. The poisoned olive branch. Gordon invites them over for Chinese food the next day. A move of just stunning social manipulation.
And Mike felt accepting would clear the awkwardness. This decision really highlights that powerful human instinct to seek resolution and peace, even when you're faced with obvious danger. So they went that Friday night, and the atmosphere was tense. Gordon immediately became relatively intoxicated, and as he drank more wine, his internal boundaries just dissolved.
The sources detailed the progression of the toxicity. It starts with these passive-aggressive comments, like the racially charged one. I know you guys love Chinese food. And that was followed by little rude comments that just grew less passive and more direct.
The eruption was inevitable. It was fueled by alcohol and his underlying resentment, which Mike learned later was connected to his wife leaving him years ago. Gordon grew louder and more angry. He overtly stated his hate, resenting that an Asian couple had moved into a town that he perceived as historically white.
And this is the moment the true terrifying motive was just unmasked. He stopped denying the trespasses. He confesses it was him going into the backyard. The final words were unambiguous. He told them they were not welcome there and that the neighborhood wasn't for people like us. The threat wasn't just a creep. It was overt, confessed, racist hate.
The emotional weight of that realization must have been immense. Mike and his fiancée immediately fled, not speaking a word until they were safely locked inside their own house. They realized their vulnerability was rooted in their identity, and the threat was intentional, not just some random act of a strange person.
They then did the community check. They canvassed other neighbors. And while some were shocked, others weren't surprised at all.
So he was known.
He was a known problem, a known drug. But knowledge, as we see so clearly here, does not equal protection.
No, it leads to the final, terrifying act of escalation. They tried to avoid him, but Gordon wasn't finished. One night, a brick was thrown through their downstairs window. It shattered glass everywhere. This moves the threat from psychological intimidation to explicit violence and property destruction.
And Mike notes the critical fact. They knew it was Gordon, but they had no proof.
And that lack of proof is the precise point of the legal failure here. The police, they filed a report. They talked to Gordon, who, predictably, denied everything and acted confused. The institutional outcome was just devastatingly simple. The police could only document the incident.
No arrest, no protective order, just documentation of their terror.
The sheer mental exhaustion and the financial cost absorbing the broken window, the fear of future attacks, it all became overwhelming. Mike notes they were too scared to stay, feeling they could be murdered.
So they were forced to just absorb the financial burden of selling their dream starter home and moving within 2 months. This isn't just a bad neighbor dispute. This is a comprehensive, successful campaign of forced retreat. And it was executed because the perpetrator understood the limitations of circumstantial evidence in the legal system.
Yeah.
The feeling of having to abandon your first home because the justice system can only document your terror, it sets such a chilling precedent. Let's transition now to case study 2, where the deception was even more perfect and was masking not hate, but murder.
Case study 2 involves Noah and Gabby, and it really shifts our analysis. We go from that externally motivated hate to an internally motivated hidden violence. This case explores the devastating effectiveness of the perfect suburban facade in concealing abuse and, eventually, tragedy.
The initial details are, again, just a picture of domestic perfection. New house, quiet neighborhood. The neighbors to the right, Daniel and Veronica, were the ideal neighbors. They were described as friendly and welcoming.
They even provided that classic neighborhood gesture.
The welcoming gift. They baked Noah and Gabby a red velvet cake.
The red velvet cake is such a potent symbol here. It represents manufactured perfection. It's visually appealing, it's rich, it's sweet, and it's designed to signal trust and community. It is the perfect mask for the dark ingredients, the violence and control that were actively brewing just beneath the surface of Daniel and Veronica's life.
The cracks started to show pretty quickly, but subtly enough. Then Noah and Gabby, they initially rationalized them away.
Yeah.
The first argument was around 11 p.m. one night. Loud shouting, followed by Veronica storming out and driving away. A few days later, they heard clear yelling again.
And this is that critical moment where the social pressure to maintain the quiet and peaceful neighborhood narrative just takes over.
Right.
Noah and Gabby did what most of us would do. They dismissed it as a typical couple's disagreement, insisting it was not our business. They were practicing a kind of involuntary denial, which is a powerful psychological defense mechanism. You ignore the red flags because acknowledging severe domestic conflict means intervening, and that shatters the fragile, necessary peace of the neighborhood. It introduces risk.
But the situation didn't just normalize. After that second argument, Veronica's car disappeared for days and then for weeks. Daniel's car was still there. Noah initially defaulted to the benign explanations. A vacation or maybe a separation.
But Daniel's behavior began to change dramatically, signaling the crisis.
How so?
His behavior became textbook for someone who is trying to suppress a massive, terrifying secret. He started actively avoiding Noah and Gabby. He wouldn't wave. When he was forced to talk to them, he spoke fast, was clearly nervous, and he tried to end conversations abruptly.
He's rushing through it.
Rushing through the minimal social interactions required, because maintaining that normal rhythm of neighborly small talk is impossible when you are hiding something deadly 20 feet away. The guilt and the fear were just leaking out through his body language.
After 3 weeks of this oppressive silence, Noah describes his curiosity finally overcoming his caution. Despite Gabby's earlier hesitation, he felt compelled to ring Daniel's bell, just wanting to check in.
Slow down and focus on Daniel's reaction at the door, because it's a study in panic and deception. It took him almost 3 minutes to answer, a delay that, in this context, is just agonizing. When he finally opened the door, he looked off. The source notes, he was sweating like he just ran a marathon, and he had this weird forced smile plastered on his face. Every sensory detail Noah registered just screamed distress and fundamental deception.
Daniel quickly deployed the cover story. He said Veronica was staying with her mom for a while out of state because she's very sick. Noah immediately knew it was a lie, just based on the sheer physical anxiety Daniel was exuding.
And when challenged about the sweating,
he clumsily claimed he was doing workouts upstairs, yet he was speaking quickly and seemed incapable of calm thought.
The lies were transparent to an observer, and the contradictions were piling up so quickly. But what transforms this into definitive horror is that terrifying moment of confirmation, while Daniel is still attempting to maintain the facade.
Exactly. Noah's heart dropped when he heard a voice scream from somewhere inside the house. He was almost positive it was a woman's voice yelling for help.
And Daniel's panic was instantaneous, confirming Noah's worst fears. He immediately contradicted his workout claim by saying he was playing a movie upstairs and forgot to pause it. The shift in the lie from active physical activity to passive screen time, that provided Noah with the final, undeniable proof that something was desperately wrong and that Daniel was concealing a person inside.
This is the moment of intervention. The social contract was shattered, and Noah overcame that immense psychological pressure to ignore the red flags. He immediately went home and called the police for a welfare check, despite the risk of Daniel knowing he was the one who snitched.
That is an incredibly difficult moral choice to make in real time, knowing the threat is your immediate neighbor.
And the response was dramatic and swift. Sirens filled the quiet street, caught multiple police cars, an ambulance. Daniel was taken away in handcuffs, and the horrifying truth was revealed shortly after Veronica was rushed out on a stretcher.
The facts hidden behind that perfect suburban facade are almost unbelievable. Daniel had been keeping Veronica locked in the basement for weeks,
subjecting her to sexual and physical abuse. He had even sold her car to successfully maintain the illusion that she had simply left town.
And the scream Noah heard, that was the result of a horrific act. Daniel stabbed Veronica 5 times because she had made noise when he told her to be quiet while he answered the door.
Wow.
That level of pathological control, where maintaining the deception in front of the neighbor was more important than the victim's life. It's just stunning. And tragically, Veronica died hours later.
But the terror didn't end with Daniel's arrest. As he was being escorted away, Daniel looked directly at Noah and delivered a specific personal threat. I know it was you who snitched on me, and you'll regret this.
And that threat, directed at the person who disrupted his reality, it forms the root of Noah's lasting trauma.
It's the internalization of the killer's threat. Just a couple of nights later, safe in his own bedroom, Noah woke up screaming. He describes seeing the vivid silhouette of Daniel in the darkness, repeating the exact words of the threat. I told you would regret this.
The vision even included Daniel holding a knife and lunging.
And the source notes the persistence of the psychological wound. Most nightmares, they fade. But this one stayed vivid. The words were the exact words Daniel yelled in reality. The threat was branded permanently onto Noah's subconscious, turning his own bedroom into the scene of the killer's final act of psychological warfare.
And here's the added layer of trauma. Noah never told Gabby, who's now his wife, about the dream. He feared stressing her out or having her think he was crazy, so he carried that internalized terror alone.
That's heartbreaking.
It highlights a profound consequence of living next to a killer: the inability to trust safety, the constant memory, and the eventual necessary flight from the neighborhood to regain some sense of peace, leaving the victim emotionally isolated even from his own partner.
2 cases so far, both featuring a complete betrayal of neighborly trust, resulting in massive trauma. One rooted in external hate, the other in hidden domestic violence. Let's pivot now to case study 3, where the horror is it's acoustic and deeply psychological.
Devin's story brings us into a different kind of proximal threat: the involuntary intimacy of urban density. We shift from the detached suburban house to a small old duplex in Queens, New York, and this physical reality is the central antagonist.
Right. Devin rented the left side. The neighbor, whom she never saw and only knew worked nights, rented the right. And the defining feature was the shared boundary. Her bedroom wall was the same wall as the neighbor's bedroom. She could hear faint movements just by pressing her ear to the wall.
This is a perfect illustration of that concept of involuntary intimacy. In a dense urban setting, you are forced to share your most private soundscapes. You know someone is just 2 feet away, conducting their own life. In this case, the anonymity of the neighbor made that forced closeness even more unsettling. The barrier is theoretical, the sound transmission is absolute.
The auditory intrusion started subtly. Devin heard a man talking, but in a high-pitched, like someone tried to talk in a fake voice. It was mumbling, faint, but the thinness of the wall made it feel like the person was right next to her head.
That fake, high-pitched quality is immediately unsettling, isn't it? It suggests performance, not a natural sound, a calculated manipulation. And Devin's initial response was textbook rationalization.
She tried to blame it on a phone call or the TV.
Exactly. She then employed her first defensive retreat, putting a blanket over her head, signaling denial, and a desperate attempt to create a psychological barrier where the physical one had failed.
A few nights later, the mumbling returned, but louder. She convinced herself it sounded like he was just talking to himself. But 2 weeks in, the noise escalated from random sound to deliberate, acknowledged communication. The knocking began.
This is the profound shift in the threat dynamics. Lying in bed, she heard 2 taps on the wall right next to my head. Identical, repetitive, unmistakable. This wasn't the house settling. It wasn't random plumbing noise. This was controlled, repeated, direct interaction. The knocks moved the event from just ambient sound to purposeful acknowledgement of her presence.
Her reaction was total physical shock. Flinching, shaking, sitting straight up. And she made the conscious choice not to knock back. She recognized that acknowledging it would likely make it worse. She understood, intuitively, that the perpetrator was seeking recognition and engagement would grant him control.
And this is where the paranoia deepens. She was intensely aware that he was literally lying just 2 feet away from me. And the knowledge that he was controlling the interaction through sound amplified the terror exponentially. The knocks continued for a week, fluctuating in intensity until the pivotal night where the ambiguity ceased entirely.
Here's the moment the psychological barrier failed. Devin was lying in bed, awake but still. She heard the knocks again. 3 slow ones. She didn't react. And then the voice came through the wall. Still that high-pitched, fake voice, but clear enough to hear the words.
And the words were a total breach of the 4th wall of her private space. The voice asked, "What are you doing in there?" This wasn't ambient noise. It was a direct, personalized question.
The source material describes the impact immediately. Her lungs locked up, her teeth shattering. This was no longer passive surveillance. He was now acknowledging me directly, confirming that he knew exactly where she was, confirming his awareness of her silence, and waiting for a reaction.
Her immediate intervention was vital. She called her boyfriend, whispered the story, and waited with the lights on until he arrived. The subsequent silence, she notes, felt almost worse, as if the neighbor knew the boyfriend was there, a temporary external shield against the menace, confirming that the neighbor was still listening and adapting to her defense.
For a few days, things were quiet, leading Devin to question her own perception. She wondered if the high tension was making her mishear things. But a few nights later, the final culminating event happened, the one that forced her to flee.
She was fully asleep this time.
Fully asleep, when the drumming taps on the wall snapped her awake. This time, out of sheer terror and adrenaline, she broke her silence. She screamed back, yelling for him to leave me alone.
And this is the true raw horror. A voice, not the high-pitched one, but deeper and closer, came from inside her room, right there in the dark, saying, "Go to sleep."
That moment represents the complete and total collapse of the home as a sanctuary. The external threat, the wall, the neighbor next door, it instantaneously transformed into an internal, immediate threat.
The dark room, the presence.
The sound of the voice coming from inside her physical space caused an immediate raw panic. It launched her off the bed, running barefoot into the street, screaming over and over.
The aftermath was just defined by an unresolved mystery. When the police arrived, they found her front door open, but they found no signs of forced entry. They checked every room, every closet, but no one was found.
And the ambiguity here is the lasting psychological weapon, isn't it? Devin couldn't remember if she had unlocked the door in her panic. Was the voice real? Did the neighbor have a key? Was the police search insufficient?
The police could only document the absence of evidence.
So she was forced to flee without resolution, moving out after fighting for a full day to break her lease.
And the final eerie detail, the neighboring tenant eventually moved out too, without saying a word.
Read.
It just leaves the entire incident suspended in psychological menace. Devin correctly dismisses the all-in-my-head narrative, understanding that regardless of whether the physical invasion was confirmed, the psychological violation was absolute and permanent. The forced intimacy of the shared wall had been weaponized until her only recourse was self-exile.
Okay. We have dissected 3 harrowing and distinct accounts of neighborly threat. Now, we have to dedicate some time to synthesizing the common threads that connect all of them. The mechanics of deception, escalation, legal failure, and the lasting trauma that connects Mike in Georgia, Noah in the suburbs, and Devin in Queens.
Let's start with the central role of deception and the hidden self. What these cases fundamentally teach us is that proximity incentivizes the masking of dangerous internal states, whether it's hate, severe abuse, or severe psychological disturbance.
The suburban ideal almost demands a facade of conformity, doesn't it?
Precisely. Mike's neighbor, Gordon, maintained a welcoming enough smile while he was actively stalking them based on racist animus. Noah's neighbor, Daniel, baked that perfect red velvet cake and acted like a friendly, normal guy while holding his wife captive in the basement. The social expectation of the neighborhood is weaponized by the perpetrator to conceal malice and to lower the victim's guard.
We saw this play out in the form of initial friendly gestures. Gordon offered that polite apology after the midnight stare.
And Daniel offered the welcoming cake.
Exactly. These gestures serve to reinforce the community facade and provide plausible deniability, allowing them to test the victim's psychological boundaries before deploying the true severe threat. The neighbor is the hidden variable, protected by the assumption of shared civility.
Now, if we connect these threats, we can establish a sort of 4-stage escalation spectrum based on the source materials. And this spectrum shows the swift, dangerous progression from slight discomfort to existential danger.
Okay, stage 1 would be passive observation.
Yes. This is Gordon's initial silent surveillance, the hidden staring from behind curtains, the vanishing act. It's unsettling, it's ambiguous, and it's very difficult to challenge without sounding paranoid.
And Devin experienced a version of this with the initial, muffled, high-pitched talking through the wall, that ambiguous sound that she tried so desperately to rationalize.
Stage 2 is auditory harassment and boundary testing. This is when the interaction becomes deliberate but still contained. Devin's story is the perfect example. The calculated, repeated 2 taps, moving to 3 slow knocks, and then the direct verbal questioning through the wall.
And in Mike's case, this was the moment of the false apology for the stare, where the perpetrator acknowledges the violation but uses a plausible excuse to test tolerance.
Then you have stage 3, physical boundary crossing. This is the leap from psychological warfare to the physical invasion of space, forcing a confrontation. This is Gordon's intentional late-night trespassing into Mike's yard, accompanied by that clumsy lie about chasing kids.
The goal there is to dismiss the victim's authority over their own property and just assert control without committing a fully prosecutable crime.
And finally, stage 4, overt violence and collapse of contract. This is the irreversible act. Gordon throwing the bra through the window, explicit property destruction designed to terrorize. In Noah's case, this was the physical abuse culminating in the murder. This is the moment the neighborly contract is entirely dissolved by an explicit intent to harm or destroy.
And once that line is crossed, the victim's only safe option in every single one of these cases was retreat.
Yeah.
That brings us to the most crushing commonality, I think, the vulnerability of homeownership and the legal impasse. What protection does the average citizen have against a sophisticated campaign of harassment executed by their closest physical proximity when that campaign is designed specifically to exploit legal loopholes?
The sources reveal a profound failure of institutional protection. In both Mike's and Devon's cases, the police could only document the incident. And why? Because the burden of proof for criminal harassment or intentional damage is extremely high. Gordon could deny throwing the brick, and in the absence of a witness or video, it just became circumstantial.
And the duplex neighbor was never physically caught inside, leaving Devon's experience completely ambiguous from a legal standpoint.
This highlights the catastrophic gap in the law. When the threat is continuous psychological warfare carried out through ambiguity and denial, the legal system requires concrete, unassailable evidence, video, fingerprints that victims often can't obtain while they're simultaneously prioritizing their own immediate safety. The perpetrator exploits this gap expertly.
And the financial and emotional cost falls entirely on the victims. Mike and his fiancée lost their first chapter home, forced to absorb the costs of selling quickly and moving within 2 months. Devon had to fight to break her lease. The financial stability that homeownership represents is dissolved by the necessity of immediate self-preservation, while the perpetrator often faces no immediate legal consequence.
It's a system that protects the right of the aggressor to deny, but fails to protect the victim's right to security.
Furthermore, even when the threat is legally contained, as it was in Noah's case with Daniel in jail, the psychological damage remains. The violation of the sense of safety is permanent and it's internalized.
We see 3 distinct types of lasting trauma. For Mike and his fiancée, the trauma is rooted in the fear of what might have been, the realization that they could have faced imminent murder if they had stayed.
For Noah, the trauma is the internalization of the killer's final threat, that enduring vivid dream that won't fade, transforming his subconscious into a permanent scene of conflict.
And for Devon, the trauma is the unresolved question. The complete breakdown of reality caused by the voice potentially coming from inside her sanctuary. She had to flee without ever truly confirming the truth, meaning the violation isn't a memory, but a lingering, open possibility of danger.
These stories demonstrate that the psychological toll far exceeds any physical damage, forcing victims to carry that violation with them, destroying the very core sense of security that the home is supposed to provide.
It really does.
We've taken an extensive and often chilling deep dive into 3 detailed accounts of proximal terror. I think the key takeaway for you, the learner, is how swiftly the foundational trust of community can be dissolved by hidden malice, requiring immediate, often financially crippling self-preservation.
We observed how proximity, the shared fence, the thin wall, the close driveway, amplifies the threat. We have to learn not to mistake an unnerving feeling for a simple misunderstanding. That awkward feeling Mike had, the nervousness Noah detected, the high-pitched voice Devon heard, these were the small, compounding warnings that, when properly synthesized, pointed directly toward existential danger.
It forces us to reconsider the boundaries we maintain. When we choose to live in densely packed communities for convenience, we trade true isolation for a forced, involuntary intimacy with people whose inner lives are entirely hidden from us.
Yeah.
We have to recognize that the neighbor is the ultimate hidden variable, and our safety relies on far more than just locked doors.
And if we cannot rely on institutions like the police, who can only document the incident because of the high burden of proof to prevent surveillance, harassment, and hidden violence from our closest neighbors, then the modern suburban and urban promise of safety relies solely on the unstable foundation of luck, of assumption, and not on codified reality.
That's a scary thought.
It is, and we have to ask you to consider, what unseen horrors are normalized or tolerated in the space of 2 feet or less? And how often do we mistake malicious intent for awkwardness just to keep the peace? The cost of maintaining that false peace, as these accounts tragically show, can be everything.
That is a profoundly unsettling thought, but one that is essential for understanding the realities hidden behind the suburban facade. Thank you for joining us for this intense deep dive. Stay safe and pay attention to those strange movements next door.